Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Monica Zent, a visionary entrepreneur, inventor, and strategist who merges deep expertise and a powerful network to transform how organizations innovate and thrive. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. My name is Tom Martin. I'm your host. And today I'm really excited to have Monica Zent on. Now, Monica, she is well accomplished. She has been working as an entrepreneur on a few different companies. She's also a lawyer, and she's been a contributor to many different publications. She's really been ahead of the curve on a lot of legal tech innovation, and I'm really excited to have her on the show. So with that, Monica, if you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Great. Well, thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to be on the show with you. And I feel like I should be interviewing you. What I'm doing now, I run ZentLaw. So ZentLaw is an ALSP. We've been around over 20 years, and so I operate ZentLaw. Again, we provide services across the board nationwide to enterprises and law firms. I'm also operating ZentLaw Labs, where we create and incubate legal technologies. Currently, we have LawDesk 360. It's a legal workflow collaboration tool. And then when I'm not doing that, it's really advising and investing in kind of emerging, interesting legal tech companies, particularly interested in AI. So looking at that as well.
You know, looking back in preparing for this, I see that we're contemporaries, although you blazed through university in 3 years, and summa cum laude, no less. Really impressive. Also similarities in that, I've had my hands in a few different things, and you certainly have. And I think it's a really great way to learn.
It is. I mean, I've always kind of been interested in multiple things at once. I don't know, what that is about me. Is it slight ADHD? Is it just I'm interested in many things? I don't know. But I've always been kind of interested in having sort of maybe a side hustle going on. I worked through school. I mean, I've sort of raised with sort of hardworking values and work ethics. So it was very common for me to have jobs when I was in school, even as a young person. I worked through high school. I worked all my summers, multiple jobs. I worked all through college. I worked through law school. Yeah. So for me, it was, something that I was used to, and having multiple hats on at the same time was just sort of how I grew up and how I was wired. And it's something I enjoy. But to your point, I mean, it's been allowed me to have a lot of rich experiences and meet a lot of different people I might not have otherwise been able to meet, and be able to sort of pursue some of these different avenues or passions and learn a lot along the way. So it's been very rewarding. I'm sure it's for you as well.
Yeah, definitely. But we're talking about you, and I want I want to jump back more towards the beginning that you were kind of getting at there. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in San Diego?
No. I grew up, I'm one of the rare sort of California natives. I grew up in the Bay Area mostly. I mean, we moved around quite a bit when I was younger, but then we resettled back in California. So most of my childhood and growing up years and formative years were in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. Okay.
Yeah, because I know later you went to University of San Diego, and
yes.
So I thought maybe there's a connection there. What did your parents do? Like, what were the jobs that they had, and did that influence you at all in some of the decisions you made initially?
It's hard to say. I mean, my mother was in banking at a time when there were very few women in banking. My father worked for the government. And I would say the way they influenced me probably the most were values, hard work, work ethic, that kind of thing. Yeah, definitely.
And at Santa Clara, I didn't see what you majored in. What did you major in there?
Yeah, political science and philosophy, and was a minor, but I think I was one credit away from a major on that, double major on that one, basically, or practically a double major. And feminist studies was a minor, but it was mostly poli-sci and philosophy. I know you have some philosophy in your background, so it's definitely a topic I've always enjoyed.
Yeah, guilty as charged. Um,
Yeah.
but I promise not to wax too philosophical in this interview. Um,
Another time.
but with that background, like I was curious, like some people when they go to law school, they had it, in mind. I want to be a lawyer, and like, they've been wanting to be a lawyer since they were kids. Was that the case with you, or was it more of a practical decision, kind of like it was with me? Like, what am I going to do with a philosophy degree and going to law school?
Great question. Well, I mean, early on, I was in debate for a long time and speech ever since I was in actually middle school. So I continued with debate and speech all through high school. And of course, whenever you're in debate or speech, everyone's like, oh, you've got to be a lawyer. You must be a lawyer. That's where you're going to go. And of course, so that seed had definitely been planted through the debate and speech piece that I did enjoy. I was involved in student government. So I actually thought about politics. I thought about government service and politics, sort of more of a political career. But interestingly, I enjoyed the sciences a lot and technology. In fact, I was taking coding classes at San Jose State when I was in high school and actually middle school. I was about 14 years old and taking classes. Was the only girl in that class, that coding class at the time. And I took classes in aviation. I was the only girl back then too. I mean, I'm dating myself. This is, a long time ago. And so I was always interested in sciences and things as well. And so interestingly, when I went to school, I sort of starting to think about, well, maybe I should actually switch and go pre-med here and go on sort of more of a medical career. But anyway, then I ended up flipping back to law and deciding, okay, I think I'll be pre-law. I think I'll go to law school and we'll do that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different fields that interest me. And I think that I'm drawn to entrepreneurship, quite frankly, which I jumped into practically right as soon as I was a graduate student, jumping into some of my first business ventures and kind of forming my own companies at those times. I really enjoyed entrepreneurship, and I enjoyed the ability to learn about different fields or jump into things that you're passionate about and not being kind of just committed to one field or one discipline, if you will.
Do I remember correctly that you started business school?
I did, yeah, but then I ended up starting two companies.
Yeah,
So I focused on those.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. I think the first one was a Depop.
Yeah. So it was a domain name company. So this was, I was in the joint degree program. I was going to get the MBA, but I was creating a couple of companies at the time. So the first one was a domain name company. And at the time, as you remember, I mean, we're talking 1994, 1995. So people really didn't fully understand domain names or keywords and what you could do with them and the value. And I was starting to kind of piece together in my mind. And again, I think that's that philosopher kind of background, or sort of thinking about future trends, thinking about, I'd read a book called Mega Trends at the time, and sort of thinking about these future trends and where things might be going. So I created this company, and in retrospect, like most innovative developments, you kind of look back and you're like, gosh, I wish I had kept that, or I wish I had grown it further, not knowing how big it really would be later on down the line. But at the time, I mean, I was just, again, a budding entrepreneur, and so created this company and eventually sold the catalog. So that was that company. And then another company I created, I started working in the music and entertainment industry. So I got interested in that, finished law school, was able to sort of kind of work out something with the dean to kind of finish up and go to start working while I was finishing law school and developing experience and learning that industry. I got very interested in the music industry. I started to really learn that up, just all about every aspect of the music industry, from the royalties to the performance royalties to the publishing houses and how all that worked and how you would license music and how you would use it, sync licenses, clip licenses, you name it. And so learning about that, I realized that in working with some of the studios and handling actually some licensing when I was, again, still a law student, I noticed that they were overpaying for clips and clip license data. So looking at kind of an opportunity there to create a business, which I eventually did and eventually sold as well. So that was kind of an idea of, I guess, big data, if you will, before it was big data. I didn't have a MySQL database at the time. This is late 90s, but I was creating a database with the information so that companies wouldn't overpay for clips and would also be able to quickly find where to go for these licensed pieces of music, because that was a lot of times the challenge. Pre-internet, there was no way to research this. You had to kind of just do this very manual, inefficient process to go and track down who wrote the song, what publishing house is it, where do you have to go? And it was very time and labor intensive. So again, kind of the early seeds of the efficiency mindset had been planted through these companies that I created early on without really thinking about it consciously in that way.
Yeah, because your specialization when you came out of law school was entertainment law, right?
Yeah, well, because by then I knew about music and entertainment. So I was able to roll right in and start practicing in that space because I had already been working in it for a couple of years while I was still a student. And this is something I always tell even young lawyers or emerging lawyers that I interview is get experience. No matter what you do, get experience because there's no match for experience. And it does give you that edge, but it also opens the doors to new things, other interests you may have. So yes, I did kind of roll right in. I practiced law in entertainment. It was fun, exciting, interesting. I could have fully continued on that path. I ended up relocating and coming back to the Bay Area and getting more into tech. And this is around the time when kind of the internet was starting to sort of take off, or the World Wide Web. It's like embarrassing to say that, right? Do you remember those days?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's totally funny. But anyway, so that was sort of taking off. And so getting into that work.
Yet another parallel that we have, because when I got out of law school, I went to work in the entertainment business.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah, so I was working at United Talent Agency. I worked for John Peters Entertainment Company, and then for Screen Actors Guild. But
oh, cool.
yeah, kind of some parallels there. But one thing I want to go back to that, like you said it, like it's just a thing, and like, oh, I built this and I sold this company, like. That's a big deal. Like not everybody like builds up a company and sells it. And for you, it's been multiple, companies. So like, I want to just take a moment to think about that and ask you, where did that come? Like, where did because also the timing of it, you're talking about just getting out of university and then you're creating this domain name holding company. Like, did you start it with the intention of selling it? Did you like how did you flesh out the idea of building to sell, and were like there are things to consider? Was there a mentor or someone that kind of pushed you in the direction of like, oh well, that's interesting, maybe you want to build this up to sell it? Like unpack that a little bit.
Oh, great question. Wow. Looking back, no, I didn't have a business mentor. In fact, I wish I did. I don't know. I learned about business and selling things since I was a child. We'd have garage sales when I was growing up, and I'd sell handmade things around the holidays. I did babysitting through middle school. I mean, so I was always kind of with the side hustle, as a kid. I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of in terms of developing a business sense. But I didn't have any kind of formal mentor or anything like that. It was really just, I'm going to do this. And I didn't consciously think, now that I go back, I don't think I consciously thought about selling the company. I remember thinking, and being the daughter of a banker, being somewhat financially conservative. So thinking, okay, I have some debt. I want to pay that off. So I'm going to sell this company and pay off these things, or my credit card or whatever I had. And so it was very practical at the time. And that's kind of how I ended up going that direction.
Okay. Because I think many people in like creating a business, they definitely think about selling the services or products that are part of the business. But then like the meta step of selling the business itself, that's a big step, because it requires like a whole other skill set of how to frame the value and how to find a buyer for the business. And so like it's extremely impressive that you've done that multiple times.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I think it also goes to just this idea of kind of starting things or founding a company in something I mean, I sort of was able to fall into that in a way, not without thinking about it too much, but really sort of thinking about, oh, there's an opportunity here, or this is something I know, or this is something I'm really interested in, or I see this opportunity. And so I always try to advise kind of folks that are starting businesses, young people, to think about a business in an area that or something that you're passionate about or interested in. And then a lot of times then you meet the right people, and one thing leads to another in terms of how you would have those conversations to sell a company or to sell an asset of the company, whatever it may be. It's funny too. I think being younger, you kind of travel light in a way. There's like less commitment. And so I don't feel I was attached as much to the businesses. It was like, oh, I'm creating this. Okay, I see an opportunity here. I'm going to sell this and then move on and do something else. And I remember doing that a lot and sort of creating some of the early companies, and then also just even the way that I'd lived. Before I ended up getting interested in buying real estate, I would move frequently to wherever was closest to where I was working, right? You probably remember LA traffic, and nobody wants to drive, 1 or 2 hours. And this is pre-cell phone days. So you're like stuck in the car listening to your radio pretty much. So I remember, so that idea of not kind of being overly committed to something until it produces something, and then being able to move away and walk away from it and move on to something else. And I find as we get older, it's a little harder to do that. But when you're emerging as an entrepreneur, you don't think about it maybe as much.
Yeah, I hear that. And I think developing, like you did, that skill early on, uh, sounds like it developed that, ability for you to have that more objective view of it. I think I might be a little bit on the other side of the spectrum, where like it's my baby and it's harder to let go. But
It is, and it can be, and I'm there too with you in certain businesses, obviously, But I think that it's hard to let go of businesses that we've invested significant amounts of time and energy and into, or from our in our lives, and it's hard to kind of say goodbye to that or look at the next chapter. So it can be challenging to do that.
so I know you worked in a few, for a few different entertainment companies, Saban, I think, and MTM. And after that experience, though, like you did go to work for a law firm. And what was that transition like? And did you enjoy working in a law firm, or was it stifling?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. So I did end up going because I thought, well, I need to sort of check that box. I've gone to law school. I practiced law in house. I need to practice law in a law firm. I want to be able to check that box and do that, see what that's all about, what's going on there. And it was easy. I mean, I had multiple offers at the time, and I was able to sort of figure out, okay, which one do I want to take? So I ended up taking one, relocating to the Bay Area and getting sort of more into tech practice. And it was like, what you expect, right? Or a typical sort of big law experience. It is a grind. There's no way to sort of sugarcoat that. But I did learn a lot. I met some interesting people. It gave me, though, some interesting insights into just how, kind of big law operates and sort of the business model, and being able to see that firsthand and how that works. And so that's what led me to eventually create an ALSP, which at the time, there really was no term ALSP. I mean, we were calling ourselves an alternative to the legal services model. The idea of an ALSP, and when it was being used by me, I was using it, but then we have, a few contemporaries in the space. It was a term that was hardly understood. And the idea of bringing kind of subscription legal services and flexible talent and these sort of other innovative offerings to a space that previously had only known the billable hour and had only purchased legal services from conventional law firms was pretty revolutionary at the time, and people really were not fully on board with that idea. So it was rough to get, to say the least, to get that business started. But I do tend to like challenges, so I stuck with it, and I'm glad I did.
For people listening in that might not be familiar with ALSP, it's Alternative Legal Service Provider.
Right, which frankly, I don't think the term alternative really means a lot anymore. I mean, I just wrote a piece recently, it'll come out soon, about just making the case for why are we even calling it ALSP anymore? It really should just be LSP, Legal Services Provider. But that sounds like Lisp, and I don't know if many people would want to call it a Lisp. But but basically, yeah, we really we can drop the ideas. We can drop this notion of alternative, because it's not as alternative anymore. And ALSPs, or legal services providers that are not a conventional law firm environment, are really an emerging and continue to kind of take over a lot of the industry in terms of what we can accomplish and do.
Yeah, also with like alternative career paths for lawyers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we've been able to create many of those through our business. I mean, at ZentLaw, we've been able to sort of help a lot of folks navigate into alternative career paths, or paths that they previously weren't able to access, whether it's jumping from law firm work over to in-house, to jumping into legal operations. We were doing legal ops related work before legal ops was even called legal ops. So as you know, that's a huge area that's grown, and and kind of really opened up as well.
So before we get into ZentLaw, I do want to talk about a couple of the startups, that you put together. Is
Sure. Yes.
Foxworthy, right?
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
And also LawDesk 360.
Hmm.
And so, what are they? What did they do? And how did that experience go for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Well, let's see. I mean, I created some early kind of legal tech things within sort of ZentLaw Labs early on, kind of experimenting with some chatbots and things like that. I know you did some of that yourself too. And in terms of the Foxworthy was sort of a social collaboration platform. The idea of bringing sort of a unique social collaborative tool, social networking to legal. And the product, I mean, it didn't go, it didn't sort of pan out as I had hoped or expected. Maybe not too surprisingly in hindsight. I mean, it was one of these products that maybe it was either probably not well timed for the legal industry at the time. I mean, the idea of lawyers collaborating with each other to save time and energy and money was something that at the time it came out made a lot of sense. The question is, where were these people going to collaborate? And my theory was, okay, there's a platform and they can go there. It didn't end up we did actually have some very large associations on the platform. We had the National Bar. So we did have some sort of large groups like this on the platform, but it didn't sort of have that mass adoption that, you sort of need for a social platform. And, at the time, as you remember, I mean, LinkedIn was popular, but it wasn't as heavily used the way it is now. I mean, the legal industry has completely embraced LinkedIn, and you see people all the time on LinkedIn. But we're looking, I mean, 8 or 10 years ago, that really wasn't the case. I mean, it wasn't as heavily used. I was an early adopter of LinkedIn. I'm sure you were too. And so I was on there. But again, there was not a huge group of us on there regularly active. And then you have conversations that were happening on different social media, like Law Twitter and then other sort of other products out there. But again, characteristic of the legal industry, kind of very splintered, right? And not sort of able to have this very cohesive experience. So that was the goal and kind of the original objective. But again, sometimes you have companies, you start them, and they're not always going to be successful. They're not always going to pan out, or they're not always going to be the right product at the right time. Sometimes it's a timing issue. Sometimes it's that product market fit. My theory on that one is it was more of a timing issue, really. And but also, and it didn't need to be, because while that came out, there were also people that were, there was increasing adoption on social media in general. So people were kind of really embracing more discussions, even through Facebook and so forth. So you had more Facebook groups popping up as well. And so it was just not the right product at the right time.
And that's Foxworthy?
Yes.
So how was LawDesk 360 different? Like, what was that?
Yeah, LawDesk 360, though, some of the technology that was in Foxworthy was quite good. So kind of taking that idea and building upon it. And then we created a totally separate product, which was on new technology called LawDesk 360. And LawDesk 360 was still this idea of collaboration, but really an enterprise platform product. So LawDesk 360 is an enterprise collaborative product where you can collaborate both within and outside your organization. You could collaborate with your outside counsel. You can collaborate within your in-house legal team. You could collaborate across even members of your legal team with maybe other cross-functional teams, whether that's finance or tax or procurement or compliance. And so that product was designed to fulfill a need, because what we were seeing on the ZentLaw side with a lot of clients is that they didn't have sort of that internal collaboration tool. They had things that, well, some companies at the time were using SharePoint, which wasn't the best collaboration tool. They didn't have a collaboration tool within some of their other products. And then they were using messaging applications, or they'd be doing, getting Slacks and so forth from their client team members. And so there wasn't anything that was somewhat cohesive, but also built for the legal industry. We also put AI into the product. And some unique kind of functions around clauses and being able to sort of develop and generate language and use that language in your product. So Foxworthy is still out there, it's still being used, and we'll figure out sort of what makes sense for that product, but as it continues to grow and evolve. But that's LawDesk 360.
And just to point out to everyone, you founded ZentLaw in 2002, right?
Yes.
So, like, in addition to that, like running a legal services company, as a lawyer, you're doing these side projects with these startup SaaS products. Wow, that's that's a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I know it is a lot. And it can be too much at times. But it is a lot, but I enjoy, the challenge and the thrill of sort of seeing something come together. And I found that I enjoy sort of innovating and creating products or ideas or strategy. That's something that I found that I enjoy a lot in these recent years, and continue to do a lot of that. With running these entities. And I do spend a lot of time with ZentLaw, and I enjoy operating ZentLaw, and that's what I've been doing for some time. So that's kind of, I think, where most of my heart is. And Lawdesk 360 is a great piece of technology that I've been able to be fortunate enough to create and bring to the marketplace. And now sort of looking at how we continue to kind of bring it to the marketplace and what arrangements make the most sense.
And I think you also you anticipated where law firms were going with this because, as you mentioned, part of the development of it had to do with what a client was asking for. And now it seems more commonplace that larger law firms that, are employing developers and have their, chief technology officers or now AI officers contributing to these projects to bridge the gap with their clients, where you have kind of like the law firm has actually become partly a developing company. And it sounds like you've been doing it for quite some time.
Oh yeah. I mean, we had a labs function before it was kind of cool to have a labs function, quite frankly. I mean, we've been doing this for some time. And I think that's, I wrote a piece many years ago about the innovation mindset in the legal industry and how important that is and what it means and why to have it. And after that, I felt like there was so much innovation talk coming out. But yeah, it's been something we've been talking about for a long, or I've been talking about for a really long time. I know you've been talking about it too, and you're writing and speaking. And so I think those of us who kind of can look around corners, we can see some of these developments and why they made sense. But now they're almost ubiquitous. I mean, almost across the board, you see law firms creating technology or trying to homebrew their own solutions for whatever kind of client issue they're trying to solve for. And there's good to that. It's can be challenging because I think the legal industry continues sometimes to get in its own way by remaining very splintered, not adopting the solutions that are out there, continuing to kind of want to develop their own. And so it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with some of these different solutions. And I suspect we'll continue to see more consolidation in the industry around some of this technology. And so what will that mean for the various kind of law firm hubs or tech hubs, if you will? I don't know, but I think they'll continue to kind of try to look for opportunities of where they can develop technology.
So I do want to take a moment to unpack that whole concept because
Sure.
Because it's not something that I think is a natural or intuitive thing for a lot of lawyers and law firms. Because I venture to guess that a lot of lawyers and law firms, when they think of technology and the whole labs kind of concept for a law firm, they see it as separate. They see it as like, okay, I'm doing my work, for my clients day in, day out. And this whole like development, creating software that's even in parallel to law is just kind of a distraction. It's like it's a nice to have. It's kind of out there. Yeah, maybe these big law firms are doing it because they have a huge budget and they can afford to do it, but it seems abstract. So to bring it home, what's the value for lawyers and law firms that are thinking that way that I just described to add on this kind of like labs piece? Does it help them to get ahead? Is it just a distraction? Is it just a nice to have? Or do you think it's something that's critically important for them moving into the future?
That's a great question, Tom. I mean, it's hard to say. I would say there has to be some thought around the strategy on that. And what is that strategy going to be? I think just creating a labs function for the sake of having a labs function and tinkering with technology. I mean, yes, you're totally right. It can take away from what needs to be happening on the business front. It can also be somewhat of a distraction. So really having an intentional strategy around what are we going to be creating? Are we creating technology? Are we just going to incubate and invest in technologies? Are we creating something that solves a very specific and unique client need? Or are we creating something that's going to bridge our ability to communicate and service our clients in a way that works with the technology they have? So there's a lot of different strategies that could be adopted on sort of the framework for or thesis, if you will, for why that lab's function exists. And I think having sort of a law firm having a discussion internally or figuring out that with that strategy and that thesis is going to be the best thing for them, so that they're not spinning their wheels and or getting distracted with an aimless venture that really doesn't make a lot of sense.
I mean, I think especially right now with things being so fluid and a bit chaotic with AI and integrating it into legal services, that having that kind of lab, which people are doing informally anyways by experimenting with ChatGPT and other co-pilots or what have you, is that you get familiar with it. Like by experimenting, like you've done your whole life,
Yeah.
they can become more familiar with these tools and then figure out how they fit in, because ultimately, like it's just going to be a common fact of life that we will be using all of these tools.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I know those of us that are technologists, it's kind of something we typically do, but it's true, hiring, I run a services organization. So as we look at talent and people we bring in, what is their tech competence and how do we encourage and foster more tech competence? And then we have a whole generation. We're going to have a whole generation of sort of emerging legal talent where they are going to be AI first in many ways, and sort of providing tools or resources for them to continue to build on those skills, but also be efficient and utilize those in the most responsible way possible. And so I do think that having some kind of technology focus within some of these organizations, whether you're an LSP or a conventional firm, makes sense. It's just, what does that look like? And I'll say, even for ZentLaw Labs, I mean, we've morphed as we've evolved. Originally, it was about creating technology. Now it's not so much. It's more about looking at how technology can help our clients solve problems that they have. How can they best leverage, for example, generative AI, and also looking at sort of technologies that maybe we are interested in investing in or helping to bring to our client base just through being involved with those projects, or does that make sense for us? So kind of looking at somewhat of morphing it into a venture arm eventually.
So let's dive into ZentLaw a bit more. You've described it as an alternative legal services provider. I've also seen it described as like on-demand legal services.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit more about what that is, how it's different than a traditional law firm, and what's the value proposition for clients?
Yeah, sure. Well, how it differs from a conventional law firm, I mean, some of the chief differences are, we're not built on a billable hour model. That's not sort of the chief driving business model behind the business. There's not a partnership structure. There's not sort of this hierarchy. And in terms of the offerings, I mean, there's savings that's built in, so there's value. There's a value and efficiency orientation, and we are aligned with our clients. So unlike sort of conventional law firm environments where sometimes those interests are not necessarily aligned, or I think we can all be pretty clear, then it's pretty obvious that a billable hour model is not aligned with an efficiency or value-minded kind of pricing model. It's very challenging for companies to kind of get their needs met in certain areas of work. Now, we will not typically, I mean, we're not going to be handling necessarily the bet the company litigation for an organization, but there are a lot of other areas and pockets where legal departments and legal teams have needs, whether it's legal operations level kind of support and bringing in one of our legal ops partners to work on that, or whether it's flexible talent, a legal department needing kind of that flexible talent option, or having a need around overflow support in various areas, or being able to offload sort of lower level work that eventually, as we help navigate and help our clients navigate, where can Gen AI kind of come in and help with that? So we fit in sort of in an area as a resource provider to our legal department clients, as well as law firm clients, in terms of helping them to do more with less. We are efficiency and value oriented. So really that efficiency and value is part of our DNA at ZentLaw, and being able to bring that to clients and help them be more efficient and do more with less and save at the same time is a chief component of our value proposition.
But it all makes perfect sense, because it's basically you distilling all of the lessons learned from your years of experience doing all of this experimentation and having all of this expertise, doing it for yourself, and essentially providing that to, client firms and legal departments, where you're, helping them to not have to take as much time to get up to speed on all the latest and greatest stuff, and yet they get, the benefit of all of that experience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the genesis for ZentLaw came out of my own experience hiring lawyers at firms and like, getting the bill and being shocked and wondering, isn't there a better way to do this? So, I mean, it came out of my own personal experience and also what I observed working in and practicing in a large conventional law firm, as well as putting on the hat when I was in house and hiring outside counsel and kind of wearing that hat. So I have worn all different hats at all kind of different parts of this ecosystem, both as a client, as a provider, and as a consumer of these services. And so, with that perspective, wanting to create an option for clients that, frankly, at the time didn't exist in the legal industry, and being able to provide this option to have access to high quality legal services and flexible talent at a value with an efficiency oriented mindset and a tech and client first mindset is something that really hasn't been done and wasn't done at the time we launched. And so that's what sets ZentLaw apart. And as I said, we're starting to see a lot more development with ALSPs now popping up all over the country, where at the time weren't as many of us. So yeah, it's definitely a business model that's caught on.
I'm kind of curious about the clients. Like what kind of segment are you talking about? Are you talking like medium to large firms? Are you talking about like the 500 plus law firms? Like what kind of legal departments? What kind of clients do you have?
Yeah. The clients we tend to work with, they tend to be medium to large. So sort of your large enterprise level clients, whether law firm or organizations. But we also work with sort of the mid level. So they may have firms of 50 to 100 people or legal departments of 50 to 100 people. And that's another sweet spot as well. We will tend to receive, or we do see some startup clients. It's not an area that we typically will pitch to directly, but we do see a lot of startups that come through that usually are spawned out of the companies we work with or through our network or client base of folks that we know through our client and alumni contacts.
So I'm curious to ask you like what you're excited about right now, because you definitely have been at the forefront of a lot of different things. And of course, yes, AI is in the zeitgeist and nobody can stop talking about it. And I'm not, and I don't mean to talk about AI in general, like writ large, but what are some of the things that you're excited about right now, and maybe that you're working on incorporating into ZentLaw?
Yeah, great question. Well, in terms of what I can share, I mean, I will say anything related to AI is very exciting to me. I'm sure it is to you too. I mean, any of us that have been in legal tech for a long time, I think we're sort of very excited about the possibilities that AI offers and where there are opportunities. But there are also sort of interesting things happening in terms of services and what can be done to provide, again, these services better, faster, cheaper, leveraging AI to do that. So looking at how can we leverage AI both within the legal ops context as well as the legal services context to perform services better, faster, cheaper for the benefit of our clients, and helping them to kind of develop that within their own teams or processes. So that's exciting to me. It's also very exciting to sort of see this evolution. I mean, I gave a talk couple of weeks ago to the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And I mean, I'm not an immigration lawyer, but it was a talk to immigration lawyers. And like a lot of segments of our industry, I believe that there are a lot of groups within the industry where they're just beginning to sort of look at this technology and just beginning to sort of look at how can we leverage AI in our consumer-oriented practices. I don't have a background in consumer-oriented practices. And so there's a lot of opportunity there for those parts of our industry to be able to start to figure out how can we use this in a way that's going to pass the savings and the value along to the consumer. And I think that's really interesting and exciting for those of us that have been in legal tech for a long time to be able to somewhat provide this service to help lift up some of these other segments of our industry. And that's exciting. And it's also exciting to see consumers being able to empower themselves more. I know there's a lot of work out there. We both have a lot of colleagues that are sort of in the access to justice space. And it's not even access to justice. It's even just access to tools that consumers can use to help themselves. And so being able to empower consumers with knowledge and information to handle certain things on their own. I mean, it may be something where somebody's having to negotiate with their school district or get a name change or deal with a boundary dispute with their neighbor. I mean, these are kind of common everyday Joe consumer experiences that typically they'd have to go to a lawyer and get support, or if they can't afford one, go to legal aid. And so I feel that there's a lot of interesting potential for AI to bring some of these tools and resources to people out there at large to be able to help themselves and help navigate some of these complex legal, kind of everyday legal things that they might otherwise not know how to navigate.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that, I don't know why, but the term access to justice has really kind of sidelined a lot of those opportunities. For some reason, when people think access to justice, they read it as no money in this. But it is very promising that stuff that's been looked at as access to justice now is being framed, I think, as consumer legal tech.
Mhm.
And hopefully that'll take some of the pall off of access to justice, because there's so much possibility and opportunity in it, not only for helping people, um, you know, with a lot of common legal problems that is overlooked, but there's also there's good money in this too. Like it's not going to be as much per transaction, but when you look at the volume of people that need this kind of help, there's a lot of business in it.
Exactly. And I feel that there are a lot of opportunities in terms of what AI could create or do for us in the space. I mean, I could go on and on with some, ideas and potential for what AI can create, but there's a lot of opportunities here in the consumer space and bringing kind of AI-oriented tools or resources to the average consumer or the average client. And so, anyway, that's just to answer your question. I mean, those are just a few things that excite me about what's happening in our industry.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is you'd mentioned, I think it was on your website, about employing the servant leader mindset at ZentLaw. And I'd just like to understand better what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's sort of coming out sort of leadership from a servant perspective, from the perspective of remembering that our relationships with people that we work with, whether they're clients or colleagues or team members, are relationships that are built on trust and communication and sort of that service mentality. That service orientation is really important. I learned that in some of my very early jobs. I'm always interested when I interview people that are looking for a job, sort of what are some of their kind of early experiences, work experiences, and what they learned from it. Because I feel that those early work experiences can be very formative. And mine, in my case, there was a lot of customer service and service orientation around that, and that stuck with me. And it's carried through the way we work at ZentLaw, and we really look at making sure every experience that a client has or a team member with anyone on our team or with their experience at ZentLaw is the best it can possibly be, and sort of that service-oriented mindset. And I believe that as a leader of any organization, in any field, frankly, that as a leader, you have the ability to set the tone and you have the ability to set sort of that template for the organization. And so sort of that service-minded template, that orientation around collaboration, being there as a helper, being there sort of with a service mindset, can be very powerful. And it also helps to create long-term relationships that, again, are built on trust. We've had wonderful alumni of our organization who've come back, and they've sometimes boomeranged back to us years later. Sometimes they've referred clients or people on our team. So those relationships are very rewarding. And I believe it comes from, again, building relationships with people as a leader in an organization.
I think it's a wonderful way to look at it, because I think a lot of times when we get into our heads that it's all about growth, it's about, like profit, and it's about growing a huge company, and, you forget about the people that you're serving. You forget about the why behind why you're doing this in the first place.
Yeah. And I've always said law is a people business, really. I mean, yes, there's, all this going on with AI, but at the end of the day, there is that human component, and law is a people business. We're in the business of people. I mean, we are a service industry ourselves, in a services industry ourselves. So it is really that people first mindset. And it's always been very important to me.
So now that you mentioned that, I'm kind of curious where you think this is going. Not necessarily like, a prediction per se, but how do you think the attorney-client relationship is going to be affected by this, let's say 5 or 10 years down the road? Is it going to look the same? Is it going to look different? What do you think?
That's a great question. I sort of just, I mean, addressed this a little bit in some of my talk that I gave not long ago to the immigration lawyers. It didn't end up actually coming up in that talk, but I remember thinking about it in preparation. And one of the ideas that I have is that I believe that the attorney-client relationship will remain the same, but what's going to happen is that clients are going to become, they already are becoming smarter, right? And they're becoming, in a way, I mean, consumers, we're talking consumer clients, becoming kind of smarter, more sophisticated consumers of legal services. And I think the relationship is going to change in that they're going to understand more about what goes into producing legal work. They're going to have more tools at their disposal. And this idea of legal work kind of being done in a way where nobody can really understand what's happening behind the curtain is going to go away. I believe that there's going to be increased transparency in terms of how legal services are performed and delivered, what tools are used to do that. Consumers, we're going to have continued sort of increasingly sophisticated consumers. We see that already on the in-house front. I mean, we have very sophisticated clients on the in-house front, and of course the law firm front as well. So they know what goes into conducting a piece of, I mean, they already know what goes into creating a piece of work or performing a task or doing something. And so I believe with data, armed with data and information, we're going to see an increasingly sophisticated client base across the board. And that is going to drive more transparency as well as sort of a different client relationship. The relationship will be kind of the way we've often approached our relationships with clients. I mean, one of somewhat, in a way, partnership and collaborative, but I think we're going to see more of that in the consumer space, where historically we have never seen that in the consumer space. You're going to sort of the lawyer as the expert, and they're doing some work behind a curtain, and you don't kind of know what's going on until you get the bill. And so I believe in the consumer space, that's going to change, and there's going to be more of that sense of partnership and more of that transparency and understanding by the consumer of what actually goes into the work that they're purchasing.
Well, that sounds like it's going to be good for both parties, the lawyers and the clients, because the clients will get transparency, but also the lawyers, especially if it's AI assisted, it'll be easier for them to communicate with their clients so that
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I think it's going to happen in the medical field too. I mean, the professions are very closely aligned in many ways in terms of medicine and law. And I believe we'll see this something similar in medicine play out. I mean, we're already seeing it. How many times if you ever go to the doctor or your dentist and you have an ailment, you search on it, right? You look at and then you have, questions that you can ask your provider that are detailed. And so I believe we'll continue to see increasing sophistication among people that are consuming any services, whether it's services in the healthcare field or legal services.
I have to ask you about this because, you have so much going on, and I'm always curious. And I think the people that watch and listen to this are also curious about how you get everything done. So like, is it that you're a master of scheduling and time management, or how do you make it work?
Yeah, great question. Well, you have to sort of, it's tough to get it all done. And I think that's the thing is, I mean, I even wrote a piece on this a couple years ago about you can't possibly get it all done. And it's challenging to kind of hold yourself to that standard. I think the main thing is getting as much as you can done. But yes, I will say time management is something that I learned early on, having to juggle school and sports and activities and then work. I mean, I learned that early on as a student. And so it's something that stayed with me for many years, the idea of time management. And so, yes, I will say that time management skills are really solid in my case. But also looking at opportunities of where can I save time, right? How can I leverage AI or, I was writing a piece right now about how to develop a daily Gen AI habit, right? So where and how can I use AI to do some tasks or things for me? I'm a huge fan of delegation, so that also helps. So being able to delegate, where can you delegate? Being able to use Gen AI to be more efficient, effective time management, and then being realistic, in terms of what is possible and trying to build in some time for balance. And it's hard to have balance in our fast-paced lives and modern life in general. But I believe kind of consciously and trying to build in some balance with intention is important to be able to be productive.
Well, those are all good words of advice. I was wondering, like, if you were to give advice to someone who's maybe just a freshly minted lawyer or somebody who's considering becoming a lawyer, what would you say to them?
Wow, it's a great question. I don't know. A lot of advice. I would say, well, first of all, try to get exposure to as many areas of practice or things that might interest you in the space. It's hard to know what kind of law or what kind of practice might interest you. So definitely get that experience, get that work experience early. Be an early adopter of technology. Look at the different tech out there. Teach yourself how to use it. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can self-help and teach yourself through YouTube videos and other tutorials and even sometimes online courses. So get those skills underway. Get some certifications. There's a lot of online certifications that, again, if it's relevant to your area of practice and it's going to help you, then do it if you have time in your hands. And so kind of continuing to try to educate yourself and give yourself that edge, both with experience, but also in terms of just knowledge. I know sometimes I've talked with emerging lawyers, young lawyers that oh, they don't really, I don't really know if I want to do that. I don't want to kind of spend time and get that certification or whatnot. And I always say, well, do it when you're young, do it now, while you have some time, because as you evolve in your life, right, you're only going to probably get busier and you're not going to have that kind of time. So do it now and get the experience too, jump around if you need to get the different kind of experience you need to get exposure to what you like to do, and also figure out what your strengths are. Sometimes you don't know what your strengths are until you're actually doing certain kinds of work. And then you realize, oh, I have an aptitude for this, or this is a strength that I have, I didn't realize.
At the end of the day, what makes it worthwhile for you?
What makes it worthwhile? That's a great question. It's hard to say. I mean, right? We have these, now we're getting philosophical here about what does it all mean, right?
I promise that I tried not to, but I need to ask.
Right. No, I know. I mean, yeah, I'm up for a challenge. I've been in the industry a long time. I enjoy seeing the evolution and bringing sort of great technology and services to clients and people. It's very rewarding. I will say at the end of the day, it's the people, right? For me, it's the people. It's really getting sort of that rewarding feeling of working with somebody on my team or having somebody access a piece of technology that they really enjoy, that's really saving them a lot of time, or helping a client do more with less, and they're really thrilled that they've got the support or the resources that they need. So I'll say at the end of the day, it's really what matters are the people, and what matters are is the ability to kind of bring services and products to the industry where there's a rewarding kind of payoff at the end of the day with sort of that outcome or that reaction from the people.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Well, one thing I'd like to ask you before we go is just, for people that are watching and listening and they want to keep in touch with you or maybe even learn more about what you're doing, what would be a good way for them to follow up with you?
Oh, sure. Well, LinkedIn is great. So kind of connecting on LinkedIn, following on LinkedIn, or message through there. I can't always respond to all the DMs in LinkedIn, but definitely that's one platform. We also have sort of some ways to connect through our website. So those are great avenues to get in touch and connect or stay connected.
Well, thank you so much, Monica. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Tom. It's been an honor to be here. I really appreciate the time that you spent today, and it was really great to talk with you.
Well, thank you so much, Monica. And thank you all so much for watching. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.